Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to be looking at two picture books about two of the members that were women that were mentioned in the book Hidden Figures. Now, I have already covered Hidden Figures, both the novel, the picture book, the film, and then I also covered two books on Katherine Johnson that are not part of this series. These books are part of a series. I've done those previously. They're already posted. I'll see if I can link them in the description so you guys can have access to those, because I did all that previously. They were some of my first videos. But in this video, I'm going to be looking at these two books. Now, they're part of a book series called the Picture Book Biography. So this is The Human Computer, Mary Jackson-Engineer, and then the other book is Computer Decoder, Dorothy Vaughan, Computer Scientist. So we're going to start off with this book because Dorothy Vaughan was at NASA first. Well, she wasn't at NASA. She was at Langley first. So now both of these books have something, and I'm going to read this in both of them that I think interesting. It's something that connects the books to the pictures together. So they have this little poem kind of in the beginning. So I'm going to read this to you because I think they're interesting, and it gives a good description of what these books are. So, Dorothy knew numbers made sense. They lined up just right for engineering events. What didn't make sense and made people suffer was how people were divided according to color. She didn't let that stop her from being the best, from rising to the top and helping the rest. When she saw what a new computer could do, she dove into learning how it could help you. So this is the story of Dorothy Vaughan. If you're familiar with Hidden Figures, they kind of show her. They don't show her all that well. They focus too much on Katherine Johnson, which is sad because she's an amazing woman. She was one of the first human computers at Langley Labs, and she arrived there in the 40s. Now again, she was very, very good at math, and she went to college, which was unusual for women, let alone black women at the time. But the only real avenue open to her was teaching, so that's what she did. She became a teacher, and this goes over her graduating from college, and she became a teacher to African American children. But she had kids of her own, and teaching, why it made money for an African American woman at the time, it didn't make that much money. So she ended up finding a job at Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory, commonly called Langley Labs, in Virginia. And she applied for a job, and she went and became a human computer. So they were, at the time, this is the 40s, they were looking at airplanes because they were trying to fight World War II. So, and they were trying to figure out how to make them fly faster with less fuel, essentially. And so at this time, most of the human computers were women, and most of the engineers were men. So women were doing all the calculations. But when World War II ended, they started focusing on spaceflight. So it kind of goes over there. It also talks, you've seen some of the pictures, it talks about segregation. They were forced to stay apart, and including the human computers. You had the West End computers, which were black, and then the East End computers, which were white. But now, Dorothy became one of the first African-American supervisors. She was in charge of the West End computers by the 50s. So, and she stood up for both white and black people. Now, what this scene is depicting, it's very short, but because I've read Hidden Figures, the book, this is what it's depicting. This has to do with Katherine Johnson. Katherine Johnson and other white women were, shortly after they were hired, were sent to work as computers in a specific portion of the lab. Well, after their probation period was over, they hadn't been sent back. So they were, by requirement of Langley Labs, required to basically be permanently either given back to the computing pool or given a raise and permanently assigned there. And Dorothy Vaughan went and told the supervisor this. So she went and said, you either need to give me my computer back or give her a raise and permanently assign her here. And you have to do the same for the white woman. So that's what she did. She stood up to this southern white man who was sexist. It talks about his belief on women, and told him, essentially said, you need to do your job. So I find that very cool. So it drops a little bit about this. Then it jumps, and it talks about how the physical computers showed up. And Dorothy Vaughan took the incentive to learn computer languages. She took classes. She learned how these things worked. And then she taught other women, particularly in her, because she was a supervisor, she taught her human computers, like, you need to learn the coding languages. Otherwise, we're going to go extinct. So that's what she did. And she continued to learn throughout her life. And that kind of how the story ends. So it cuts over a little bit. It has a full timeline of Vaughan's life. So there she is, Dorothy Vaughan. She was born in 1910 and then started working at Langley in 43. So she was there a long time. And then she retires in 71, because it goes from being the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratories, and then it turns into, it becomes part of NASA. So that is this story. And then at the very end, I'm skipping over a page here. So it has a couple things. You can have an activity where it says you can create a coding, shows you how to create a coding bracelet, and then has quote connections. So text-to-text connections. Can you match the quote to the moment in the story? So these are very good for, and this is a theme of this book series. So they're very good, particularly for homeschoolers, which is hopefully my main audience. So when you're teaching about the beginning of coding, African American history, if you're interested in looking at the women who were kind of brought to light in the book Hidden Figures, this is probably one of the best. I remember a quote from Katherine Johnson when they talked about Dorothy Vaughan. It's like, she was the smartest of us all. She just got stuck being a supervisor, so she wasn't able to move on until later. But she became one of the first women computer coders of her time. So this is a great story to kind of introduce to younger kids this amazing woman in history, not only African American history, but the history of women, the history of computing, even, of course, NASA history, which is kind of where these women were at. So, if I remember correctly, Dorothy Vaughan was the author of Hidden Figures, Sunday school teacher, and she had no clue. That's what I always find funny about Hidden Figures. It's the reason the author wrote the book is because she found out, wait a minute, these women I grew up in did what? And yeah, she had no clue, because they didn't talk about it. They were just doing their jobs. So that's this book. The second book is about Mary Jackson, the engineer. So the human computer, Mary Jackson. So I will again read, this is kind of the little poem in the beginning. As a girl, Mary wanted to be an engineer, but because she was black, some said, not your career. Segregation took away her path of choice until she fought back and raised her voice. Demanding to be let into classes she needed, and through perseverance and hard work she succeeded. She became NASA's first black female engineer. Then she made sure the path for others was clear. So this tells the story of Mary Jackson, who was one of the first NASA female black engineer. So she, again, liked math, similar to Vaughan. Basically, there weren't many women engineers, let alone female engineers, and they still had segregation. So she, similar to both Vaughan and Katherine Johnson, became a school teacher. Then she was also, and this is brought up in the book a lot, she's always kind of been a mentor of sorts. So she had her Girl Scout, she was a Girl Scout leader for many, many years. So then she became a clerk before she joined NASA in the 50s. And then she joined NASA. Now the next story is kind of funny. If you're familiar with Hidden Figures, the book, or not the book, the film, they do this whole weird bathroom thing, which makes no sense. What I find funny is this is what the actual events actually happened to Mary Jackson. So you see this, you have the black and white, the men's bathroom, and then white women, whites only. And this is what happened. She was sent to work as a computer temporarily on the East Side, where basically that was headquarters of the white computers. So she's sent over there, needs to go to the bathroom. There are no colored women's bathrooms on that side. She has to go all the way back to the West End and runs into this guy. His name is Kamikaze Szynski. I'm probably butchering his name. I've done it before, considering I did all the did all of the Hidden Figures books. So essentially and this kind of shows it, he thought everybody should be equal. She accidentally, because she was angered and wasn't thinking, spilled how pissed off she was to him. And I quote this directly from the Hidden Figures book. He literally said, "Come work for me." And that was it. So he was working in the, the supersonic speed tunnels. So they were trying to make things that go faster than the speed of sound. And she went to work for them. And then this goes over, she wanted to become an engineer. So that's kind of what this talks about. And she fought to go to classes at the all-segregated high school. And eventually they allowed her and I think other African Americans to do night classes. And so she was able to take the math classes she needed to become NASA's first African American female engineer. So, and she helped, similar to both Vaughan and Katherine Johnson, build some of the spacecraft and do some of the math that put men on the moon. So, and then, now this is a little different than both the other two in their stories. She chose later in life to move from the engineering office to basically the personnel office to help bring in more black female engineers. So that was her story. Now, this is similar to the other book. There's an activity and then there's a quote connection. So the activity is spaghetti strength. So essentially they're basically spaghetti and marshmallows. It's like a fun little thing. And you're kind of building a tower with marshmallows. I've seen this done. And see how strong it is. And then you have some quote connections of various different people. I think one of the quotes, this is one of the quotes of Mary Jackson. I'll read it here. "We have to do something like this to get them interested in science. Sometimes they're not aware of the number of black scientists and don't even know of the career opportunities until it's too late." So I'm guessing this is the end of the story when she's talking about trying to bring young girls into the STEM field. And then similar to the other book, there's a timeline in the back here. Mary Jackson was born in 1921 in Virginia. So she was born in Hampton, Virginia. She wasn't born far from Langley Labs. And then she goes to work in the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. That's the precursor to NASA. This is in 52. And then a year later, she takes a job with Kamikaze Szynski. So, and then 56 is when she petitions to go to school. And then 58 is when she becomes the first NASA engineer. And then she leaves in 79. So she's a NASA engineer from 58 until 79, when she goes to be an administrator and equal opportunity specialist. And then she retires in 1985. I believe she's still alive. So this is her 1977. So when she was still an engineer. And then it has a glossary. So that's this book. Both of these are really great books. They're very simple. They focus pretty much on the women's careers and how they move forward. They're very, very easy. They're very simple. They're very simplistic introductions, as opposed to the big book of Hidden Figures. Even the picture book, I think, goes into a little bit more detail than this. But these are meant to be education STEM books. They're focusing on just a brief introduction of two of these amazing women, both in general and as African American scientists and mathematicians. So these women were trailblazers and I think Mary Jackson might be the only one who really recognized it, because she's the one who went to the personnel office. Dorothy Vaughan was just doing her job, and Katherine Johnson was the same way. It's like they just didn't recognize how important their work was. Mary Jackson probably did, because she wanted to bring more young scientists in, and that's how she ended her career. So these are amazing books. I would highly recommend them. They're actually part of a series, and I'm probably going to cover them by looking on the back here. There's a couple more books on women. There may be more on men. I'm focusing a lot on, because I have a daughter, so focusing a lot on women in the STEM field. So these are great books as an introduction. They're designed, I know, just for the classroom, but probably great for the homeschool classroom, because it has not only these timelines, but it has activities and quote connection stuff built right into the book. So if you're looking at STEM history, African American history, NASA history, or really have your kids that are really into math and science and coding, these are great books to look at. They're great books in general. These women were an integral part of American history. Without them, we may have not gotten to the moon, because they were very, very, very valuable to the whole NASA labs and how we did the mathematics. They're also a great example of how women can be in math and science. So, great books. I'm covering a lot of this February. I'm focusing on 2 marginalized communities, both African Americans, because it is African American History Month because February, and then it's also Chinese New Year in February this year, so I am covering Asian History Month as well. So that's what you have to look forward to, what I'm covering this month. I'm covering always typically books on Monday, and then I believe I'm covering mostly films, probably some other stuff on Fridays this month. If you want to check out my other stuff, I covered food back in January, some recipe books, and a few other food related items. I did some fun Christmas stuff in December. I did Native American history back in November. I covered all of Harry Potter through September and October, and then covered some scary stories and some Halloween stuff as well in October. And I've done a variety of other book reviews, some homeschooling stuff, and a little sprinkling of kids travel stuff as well in there. So that is it for this review. If you like what you see, you want to see more, like and subscribe. Thank you.